love you, Carta Books. You're so good to me. Look how cute you sit every day on the cart. I appreciate the work that you do. You can be the judge of that. That's how I'd put it into words. The ending was, and I'm not gonna tell you the answer because that would be a horrible, horrible thing. The killer was, just kidding. Not gonna tell you. I am thrilled today because I get to reminisce my top 10 favorite books of 2021. And you get to be here to watch me talk about it. Boy, I just never thought I'd have the day when people want to listen to me talk about books for 10 minutes. We'll see if this is 10 minutes. All right, I have to kick it off with graphic novel first because graphic novels are something that I just got into this year, if I'm being honest. I'd always seen them at bookstores and thought, I don't think that's for me, or just kind of thought I had no idea exactly what they would entail. And then I finally picked up one, and I love graphic novels now. I can't get over the fact that I get to read basically an adult picture book, and all of the material and content is for adults a lot of the times. So I just think that's so cool, and I just have so much appreciation for an author and an illustrator. I don't know how they do it, but props to them. So this is one that stuck out with me this year, and I actually read it at the end of the year. It's called Lore Olympus by Rachel Smeeth. I think that's how you say her name. And I had never read a Persephone and Hades story before. All I ever knew about Hades was the blue-haired guy from Hercules. I know, I was not very much in the know about that. But it's a whole thing. There are so many Hades and Persephone retellings, so this is the first one I actually picked up and read. I could tell that this is a whole world that I've never experienced before. And as I read it, I fell in love with Hades, which I realize is problematic because Hades is down there. So we should not want to mess with down there, you know? But the way he is illustrated in this and the way he talks, I just love everything about him. He's kind of this shy, timid character while also being terrifying and confident at the same time. And I just think that's so cool to have a character that is polar opposite personality types all in one person, you know? And Persephone in this is this afraid, tiny little girl who is a goddess, and she immediately kind of is intrigued by Hades and wonders if he could ever fall for her. And the way that they interact is just this buildup of love, and it really doesn't get very far in this first volume, but it's enough to make my heart pitter-patter and fall in love with this story and just want so much more. No surprise, if you follow me on my Instagram, you probably remember me talking about a Kotar in February through May. This has a sweet place in my soul, especially this one, A Court of Mist and Fury. This is the second book in this series. I have read all of them, and I still am turning back to this one being my absolute favorite. The love interest changes in this one. A lot of drama happens in this one. A lot of suspenseful things happen. I remember reading this at about 1 a.m. in the morning, and I had this much more to go. And this is a heavy book. There's a lot of pages, and the tiny font is a lot to get through. But I could not stop reading, and my jaw was open for the remainder of my sleep sesh. I just think this one is my absolute favorite. I love where the story goes in this. I love that it ends with a cliffhanger. I love watching Farah's character develop and get stronger than it was in the first one. So this is just my ultimate favorite one in the entire series. And I recommend that you read a Kotar if you have been wanting to try some fantasy and romance at the same time. This one I don't think would let you down. I know that it's very hyped, and I know that it's easy to scroll past anytime you see this because you keep thinking, ugh, I know, I've seen it a million times. Why do you want me to read it so bad? It's because all of us that read it, we get this feeling where we love the world that Sarah J. Maas has created in this, and I honestly think you would not be wasting your time if you gave it a try. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Let's be real for a minute here. This book is probably one of the most well-written books I've read. A lot of the books I read are very easy reading and not super in-depth a lot of times, but this one is the most in-depth and character-driven book I've read, and for that reason, it's in my top 10. I think it is crucial to discover one little area of fantasy that you fall into, because fantasy reading is truly the most amazing reading you can find because it's totally made up. There's nothing real about it, but it feels real when you're reading it. I really hope that if this video leaves you with anything new to try, that you try a fantasy book, because fantasy has a very good place in my heart, and it's not gonna leave, especially for 2022. I'm gonna keep reading fantasy. But this is so good, and I read it before the film adaptation of Shadow and Bone came out, because if you have watched Shadow and Bone, you'll see that the characters from Six of Crows are in it also. And chef's kiss, I was super happy with who they casted in Shadow and Bone. I felt like they were perfect. Nina's probably my favorite character in this. She is a killer. She is terrifying, and she's got those real feelings that she hides down way deep down so that you almost can't tell if they're there, but they're there. And Kaz, this book is just so good, and I hope that you'll try it. And I'm not gonna lie, if you do try it, you might be like, wow, this is intense. But don't give up, because there's a scene in the end where somebody's climbing up a wall and there's fire. That scene is my favorite scene. You want a Nancy Drew-like book? This is the one. Let's be candid for a second here. If I could be anyone in this world, if I could change my name to any name in this world, I would change it to Nancy Drew. Because from a very young age, I was obsessed with trying to find mysteries and missing persons in my neighborhood. And by missing persons, I mean the missing cat from next door. I loved Nancy Drew. So when I found this book and started reading it, I fully believed Pippa was similar to Nancy Drew, the character in this book. So this one's called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and it's about Pippa, who is trying to solve a case in her hometown, and she believes someone has been wrongfully accused of murder. So right away it kind of hooks you off, and I listened to this on audiobook as well as reading it, and I highly encourage you listen to it on audiobook because it was a show. It was an experience. I felt like I was in a play, a movie theater, anything that involves eating popcorn. I am telling you, this was incredible, and it is a YA, and don't let that stop you, because if you like mysteries and if you like anything involving Nancy Drew, I truly think this is the one that you should pick up. Do you feel that chill? I do. Suddenly it's colder in here. I feel like I'm in a car driving down a dark highway, and all of a sudden I see something in the back of the car trunk. What could that be? No exit! Oh my gosh. I don't think I've ever read a book faster than this one. I read it in a day. This was me reading it. Comprehending and everything. Holy highways. This book is such a good thriller. This is No Exit by Taylor Adams. I got it in my book of the month box. I'm not sure if it's still in there, but I highly recommend you find it as an add-on. I never wanted to put it down. Every single chapter ended with a cliffhanger, and right away I knew this was not going to end well, or this was not going to end well. Let me just read the back. 13 hours, 4 strangers, 1 missing child, no exit. She knows her odds. She'll fight anyway. What is she fighting for? I'm not gonna say. Do you need to pick this up and read it? Yes, you do. If you don't, am I gonna come after you? No, of course not. I would never do that. Gosh, who do you think I am? Sweet Mr. Clune. Sweet, sweet Mr. Clune. Okay. The House in the Cerulean Sea. If you need a book that is going to make you feel like you're being hugged, you gotta pick this book up. I think this might be the most warm-hearted, kindest, decent human being type of read out there. It is such a sweet, fantastical tale about all of these kids who are at this orphanage, and they have these special abilities that separate them from, the rest of us. We're not special. They are. They're under the care of Arthur, and Arthur's basically like a father figure to them. Linus is someone who has to come investigate because he feels as though he's had reports on this orphanage and he's worried about the kids being a threat to society, and so he needs to go investigate and figure out what's going on. So Linus and Arthur meet, and you can tell right away that Arthur is going to do whatever it takes to make sure that the kids are going to be safe and will not be taken away. And it just... my heart is beating so hard from it. I'm talking about it. It truly is a book I want everyone to read because it reminds you how love is the most important thing on this earth. And I am such a believer in love. Not to be a sap. I just think if we loved everyone, we wouldn't have any more problems in this world. And Kill 'Em With Love, The House in the Cerulean Sea, such an amazing book. I never wanted it to end. I'm actually quite frustrated that this book is only 398 pages. But I do have Under the Whispering Door, which also is by TJ Klune, and I plan to read that in 2022. I love when you realize your shirt's been on backwards for half your video. That's super great. This is a fun fact about me, and my husband teaches me about this every day of life. It's getting old, but he always makes fun of how I always put on everything backwards. And am I getting dressed in the dark? No. Is this just a little quirk about me? Yeah. I put on things backwards all the time. I know I was just raving about another thriller, No Exit, and now I'm gonna rave about The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. Oh my gosh. Okay. This book reminds me a little bit of The Silent Patient, just in the fact that The Silent Patient, if you know and love that book, I feel like the reason why you love it is because the ending is so surprising. This ending is so surprising also, and the only criticisms I've heard people say are, oh, this book is not believable. Well, you know what? Believable books aren't as interesting, honey, sweetie, cutie pie. So this one, even though it might not be believable, it's freaking amazing. And I made a whole mood board for this book because it takes place at Camp Nightingale, and it's just all the spooky camp vibes. Emma has to go back, the main character, to this camp and become a painting instructor for the new girls that are there, but she's having horrible flashbacks because something very horrible happened when she went as a young girl, and history seems to be repeating itself. So, all in all,
such a good book.
Highly recommend. Behind My Back is my favorite book of 2021. Are you ready? I'm gonna probably show you some images of me crying while reading this book, but this book, The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna, is my favorite book that I've ever read. I'm actually getting teary thinking about this book. Okay, I need to sum this up because I could talk about this book for a whole video. But what I will say about this book is that this is a hard book to read. It does have triggers of abuse in there in a relationship. And the way this book goes, and by the end, you're just overwhelmed with how much has happened, and the characters in it you feel for. You want to hug them and be there for them. You feel so awful for them. So many things happen. I feel like I'm reading a story about an entire lifespan of a person. And while it is a big book, it was the perfect length, and this book made me cry and sob. And I absolutely adore this book more than anything out there. Anytime I think about my favorite book, I keep thinking of this one. And I can't put it into any other words other than tell you it's because of how I felt when I read it. And it just pulled on my heart. And Kristen Hanna has such a way of writing these beautiful stories that feel so real. And I'm sure stories like this happen to people out there. And I love that this one takes place in Alaska. This story is also about a mother-daughter relationship, Cora and Lenny. And it might be Lenny. But you watch them mold their relationship. You watch how their relationship changes over time too. And I love reading about mother-daughter relationships. That's just something that it just gets to me. So if you're going to read a book next year and you need one that's going to make you love reading, it's this one. Like, just stop the video now. If you're gonna go buy a book, go buy this one. If you need me to buy it for you, let me know, okay? Okay, finally a Ruth Ware book. I absolutely love her as an author. I love the way that she writes. I think that not all of her books are my favorite, but a lot of them I have really enjoyed. This one, The Turn of the Key, is my absolute favorite, and it also has kind of a shocking ending. I really love it because of the setting and the context. It's basically about a nanny who comes into this home that I believe is in either Scotland or Britain, but it's kind of in this setting where you feel like you're in the moors, and she comes into this family that seems a little bit off, and weird things are kind of happening in their home, and it kind of is giving you vibes that there's a ghost in their home while she's looking after these children. And the context of this book I totally relate to because I lived in Ireland for a year when I was 21 and I was an au pair for these sweet Irish girls. So I loved reading this because I connected to it in that way, and I also loved it because the ending was but yeah, really good start if you want to get into Ruth Ware. How beautiful is this cover? This is Small Favors by Erin A. Craig, and this was a new release this year that I came front and center at the bookstore to get the day it was released. Oh gosh. This one is a YA kind of fantasy, mystery, suspenseful book. I read this with Lauren from Lauren Love Reads, and we were chatting about this one because it was so fun. And this is kind of a village Rumpelstiltskin sort of book. That is what everyone's been comparing it to, and they are spot on. But it's basically about Ellery Downing, who lives in Amity Falls, and she is noticing that they just don't have enough where they live, and strange things are starting to happen. People are missing when they go on a trip to get more supplies, and a visitor arrives in their town, and they're overwhelmed with this sense of, can we trust this person? Would they be able to help us, or would they hurt us? And so it's so fantasy-like, but not overboard. It's almost believable in a fantasy way, but it is so good, and I highly encourage that you read any of Erin A. Craig's books. She's also written House of Salt and Sorrows, which is a fantastic. I seriously would have added that to this list, but I had to narrow it down, and this one I just thought was so much fun to read. But both of them are equally amazing. So I think if you're in that area where you don't really know if you're gonna like fantasy, but you do know you like kind of chilling fairy tale like books, I would highly recommend this one. And who doesn't love the story of Rumpelstiltskin? I remember reading that as a kid and just thinking, wow, I think it's so cool that they had to guess his name. I don't know why, but I'm so obsessed with people's names and how they got their name. So for me, I just think it's such a cool concept to have a little bit of Rumpelstiltskin in this book somehow. So highly recommend. Please pick this one up. Well, that's about it for my 10 books. I need to work out more. I hope that if anything, this gave you a couple laughs and a couple of good book recommendations, or if you've read any of these books, please let me know because I'd love to chat with you about them. These are heavy. Got my scratch. Thanks a bunch, and I'll see you in my next video.